The communication array aboard the UES Defiance crackled to life with an incoming transmission that would change everything. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, her weathered hands gripping the command console, as the alien message filled the main screen. The beings that appeared were magnificent in their arrogance, tall, ethereal creatures with skin that shimmered like liquid starlight and eyes that burned with ancient fire. Primitive species of the third planet. The lead figure spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through dimensions. We are the ethereal dominion, the true gods of this galaxy. For 10,000 of your years, we have watched your pathetic struggles from afar, waiting for you to evolve beyond your barbaric nature. That time has passed. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, standing beside Chen, felt his jaw tighten. The ethereal's words dripped with condescension that made his blood boil. Behind them, the bridge crew maintained their professional composure, but he could see the anger building in their eyes. We have decided that your species requires guidance, the ethereal continued, gesturing with hands that moved like flowing water. Submit to our divine rule, and we shall elevate you from your current state of ignorance. Resist, and face the consequences of defying gods. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Chen turned to her communications officer, Lieutenant Torres, who was already working frantically at his station. Sir, we're receiving similar messages across all human colonies, Torres reported, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Earth, Mars, the Outer Rim settlements, everyone's getting the same ultimatum. Chen moved to the tactical display, where holographic representations of human space showed dozens of alien vessels materializing near populated worlds. The ethereal ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them. Each one easily 10 times the size of humanity's largest dreadnought. Analysis, Commander Hayes, Chen ordered, addressing her tactical officer. Hayes, a veteran of the Centauri border conflicts, pulled up sensor readings on his screen. Their technology is significantly advanced, Captain. Energy signatures we've never seen before, hull materials that our scanners can barely penetrate. But, he paused, studying the data more carefully. But what, Commander? There's something odd about their deployment. For beings claiming to be gods, they're being surprisingly cautious. Look at their formation patterns. Hayes highlighted several tactical markers. They're maintaining defensive positions, keeping their distance from our military installations. If they were truly as powerful as they claim, why not simply appear in orbit around Earth and demand immediate surrender? Admiral Rodriguez nodded slowly. Interesting observation. What else do we know about them? Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped forward with a tablet full of preliminary analysis. Based on the transmission, I've run their physiological characteristics through our databases. There are some matches with artifacts we've discovered on ancient worlds, cave paintings, ruined structures, genetic markers in certain species. It's possible these ethereals have been influencing galactic development for millennia. Influencing, not controlling, Chen noted. There's a difference. The bridge's atmosphere grew heavy with the weight of decision. Humanity had spent the last 2 centuries expanding into space, building colonies, establishing trade routes, and yes, occasionally fighting wars. But they had never faced anything like this, beings who claimed divine authority over an entire galaxy. Captain, Torres interrupted, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. The main screen flickered to life again, this time showing Fleet Admiral Catherine Wu in her command center deep beneath Geneva. Her face was grim, but determined. All fleet commanders, she began without preamble. I'm sure you've all received the ethereal ultimatum by now. Earth Council has been in emergency session for the past 3 hours, and our decision is unanimous. She paused, her eyes seeming to look directly at each viewer. Humanity does not kneel to self-proclaimed gods. A cheer went up from several bridge stations before Chen quickly restored order with a sharp look. Admiral Wu continued. However, we're not going to be foolish about this. We need to be smart, we need to be coordinated, and we need to remind them that humanity didn't climb to the top of Earth's food chain by rolling over for bigger predators. Chen felt a familiar fire building in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced during her first combat mission against pirates in the Vega system. Humanity had always been underestimated by those who saw their relatively short spacefaring history and assumed weakness. Orders are as follows, Wu continued. All colonial fleets are to implement protocol. 7 full defensive positions around civilian populations. Military vessels are to begin reconnaissance operations on ethereal positions, but maintain safe distances. We need to understand their capabilities before we act. Minus. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew with their orders and a sense of purpose that cut through the initial shock of the alien ultimatum. You heard the Admiral, Chen announced. Hayes, I want a full tactical assessment of every ethereal vessel within sensor range. Dr. Vasquez, coordinate with xenobiology departments across the fleet. I want to know everything we can learn about these beings from available data. Torres, establish secure communication channels with all human ships and colonies. As her crew sprang into action, Chen moved to her private console and accessed classified files that few humans had ever seen. Project Prometheus, humanity's most advanced military research program. She had hoped they would never need to use the technologies developed in those black sites, but facing self-proclaimed gods changed the equation entirely. The Ethereals had made a critical error in their grand announcement. They had given humanity time to prepare, time to think, and most importantly, time to remember what made their species special. It wasn't their technology or their numbers, it was their absolute refusal to accept defeat. 3 days passed as ethereal ships maintained their positions around human worlds, apparently waiting for a response to their ultimatum. During this time, human military forces had been anything but idle. In the depths of space, beyond the range of ethereal sensors, the UES Defiance and her sister ships had been conducting what could only be described as the most important scientific mission in human history. Using long-range passive sensors and advanced AI analysis, they had begun to decode the mysteries of ethereal technology. Captain, Hayes called out during the 3rd day's briefing. I think we've found something significant. Chen looked up from her reports, noting the excitement barely contained in her tactical officer's voice. Let's hear it. They're ships, sir. They're not as invulnerable as they appeared, Doctor. Vasquez's biological analysis combined with our sensor data suggests something remarkable. Hayes activated the main display, showing a detailed scan of an ethereal vessel. Their technology appears to be partially biological, grown rather than built, and, like all biological systems, it has weaknesses. Dr. Vasquez nodded enthusiastically. The crystalline structures we're seeing aren't just decorative. They're actually living tissue, highly evolved but still bound by biological limitations. Energy distribution patterns suggest they need specific environmental conditions to function at peak efficiency. Chen felt her pulse quicken. What kind of conditions? Electromagnetic fields within very narrow parameters, Vasquez explained. Too much interference, and their biotech starts to break down. It's elegant, but it's also fragile in ways purely mechanical technology isn't. Admiral Rodriguez, who had been listening carefully, stepped forward. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Hayes grinned, the first genuine smile Chen had seen from him since this crisis began. Project Prometheus, sir. Specifically, the electromagnetic pulse weapons that were deemed too dangerous for conventional warfare. Against traditional ships, they would only disable electronics temporarily. Against biotech that depends on precise electromagnetic harmony, it would be like introducing a virus into their entire fleet, Chen finished, understanding dawning on her face. The pieces were falling into place. Humanity's defensive preparations had revealed something the Ethereals probably never expected: that their advanced biological technology, for all its elegance and power, had vulnerabilities that purely mechanical systems did not share. Chen activated her command console and began drafting a priority message to Earth Command. The ethereals wanted to be gods. But they had forgotten a fundamental truth about humanity. When faced with the impossible, humans didn't pray for salvation. They built weapons. The response from Earth Command came faster than anyone expected. Within 6 hours of Captain Chen's report reaching Geneva, every human military vessel in the galaxy received new orders that would have seemed impossible just days before. All ships, all crews. Fleet Admiral Wu's voice echoed across space through encrypted quantum channels. We are about to show these self-proclaimed gods what humanity is truly capable of. Operation Divine Reckoning is now in effect. Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as the most ambitious military operation in human history began to unfold around her. Throughout human space, vessels that had been scattered across dozens of star systems were converging on predetermined coordinates. But this wasn't just about gathering ships. It was about unveiling technologies that had been kept secret for decades. Captain, we're receiving confirmation signals from the entire Prometheus fleet, Torres reported, his voice filled with barely contained excitement. All 37 vessels are online and ready for deployment. Torres. Hayes looked up from his tactical station with amazement. Sir, I'm reading power signatures I've never seen before. Whatever they've been building in those black sites, it's not appearing on any standard military specifications. Through the main view screen, Chen could see them arriving ships that looked like they belonged in humanity's distant future rather than their present. The UES Prometheus itself was a sight that made even veteran spacers stop and stare. Where traditional human vessels were angular and functional, the Prometheus was something else entirely. A sleek predator that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dr. Vasquez was studying her readings with fascination. The electromagnetic signatures are incredible. These ships aren't just armed with EMP weapons, they're designed to function as massive electromagnetic warfare platforms. Every system appears to be hardened against their own weapon effects. Admiral Rodriguez joined them at the tactical display, his expression grim but determined. Prometheus Project wasn't just about building better weapons, it was about preparing for exactly this scenario. Contact with a technologically superior species that might not have peaceful intentions. The ethereals, meanwhile, had begun to show signs of impatience with humanity's lack of immediate surrender. Their ships had moved closer to major population centers, and their communications had taken on a more threatening tone. Primitive humans, the latest ethereal transmission began, the elegant being's voice now carrying undertones of irritation. Your silence will be interpreted as defiance. We have been patient with your inferior minds, but our divine mercy has limits. You have 12 of your hours to signal your submission, or we shall demonstrate why resistance to gods is futile. Chen watched the message with cold calculation. Torres, what's our communication lag time to the nearest ethereal vessel? Approximately 4 minutes, Captain. Perfect. Send them this message. Chen moved to the communications console, her voice taking on the formal tone reserved for important military communications. To the beings claiming to be gods, humanity has considered your ultimatum carefully. Our response is as follows: come and take our worlds if you can. The bridge fell silent as the message transmitted. Chen could see her crew exchanging glances, knowing that she had just declared war on beings who considered themselves divine. Captain, Hayes said carefully, are we really going to engage them directly? Chen smiled, an expression that would have terrified the ethereals if they had understood human psychology better. Commander, these beings have made the same mistake that every bully in human history has made. They assumed that superior technology automatically means superior capability. They're about to learn why that assumption has destroyed every empire that ever made it. As if summoned by her words, the ethereal response came swiftly. Their ships began moving toward human positions with graceful, flowing movements that spoke of supreme confidence. Energy readings spiked as their weapon systems came online. Weapons that could presumably devastate entire planets. All ships. This is Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Defiance. The Admiral's voice carried across the human fleet communication channels. Remember, we're not trying to match them shot for shot. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to fight dirty, fight smart, and fight like our entire species depends on it. Because it does. The first engagement began near the Mars orbital stations. 3 ethereal vessels approached the red planet with obvious intention of making an example of the famous human military academy located there. What they encountered instead was the UES Prometheus and her escort fleet. "Prometheus to all ships," came the voice of Admiral Sarah Kim, the brilliant tactician who had designed many of the new technologies now being deployed. Initiating electromagnetic cascade in 3, 2, 1. The effect was visible across the solar system. Where the ethereal ships had been gliding forward with their characteristic grace, they suddenly began to shudder and convulse. Their biotechnological systems, dependent on precise electromagnetic harmony, began to fail as waves of electromagnetic interference washed over them. "Direct hit!" Hayes shouted from the Defiance's tactical station. "Their propulsion systems are failing. I'm reading massive power fluctuations across their entire fleet structure." But the ethereals were not helpless. Even as their ships struggled with the electromagnetic assault, they began to adapt. Emergency systems activated, backup biological processes began compensating for the interference, and their weapons started charging again. "They're recovering faster than projected," Dr. Vasquez warned. "Their adaptive capabilities are remarkable." Chen nodded grimly. "Phase 2 then. All ships, execute protocol hammer." What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human ships didn't retreat or try to match the ethereals' recovering weapons. Instead, they did something completely unexpected. They accelerated directly toward the alien vessels at maximum burn. "Captain," Torres called out with alarm. "Collision course with the lead ethereal ship in 30 seconds. Steady as she goes," Chen replied calmly. "Let's see how these gods handle a few thousand tons of human engineering, moving at appreciable fractions of light speed." The ethereal ship, still struggling with electromagnetic interference, began to maneuver desperately to avoid collision. But their graceful bioships, designed for elegant movement through space, were not built for the kind of brutal acceleration and direction changes that human vessels could handle. At the last possible moment, the Defiance pulled up hard, her hull screaming under the stress but holding together. The near miss sent shockwaves through both fleets. But more importantly, it demonstrated something crucial: the ethereals could be surprised. They could be forced to react, and they could make mistakes. "All ships. This is Prometheus." Admiral Kim's voice crackled across the communication channels. "The gods are bleeding. I repeat, the gods are bleeding. Continue with Phase 3. Quote, "The gods are bleeding." Quote, Phase 3 was where humanity's true nature revealed itself. Instead of falling back into traditional formation, fighting, the human fleet began to move like a pack of wolves. Ships appeared from unexpected angles, struck hard at vulnerable points, and disappeared again before the ethereals could respond effectively. The UES Valkyrie, commanded by Captain Alex Morrison, pioneered a tactic that would become known as ghost striking. Using advanced stealth systems and precise timing, the Valkyrie would appear within point-blank range of an ethereal vessel, discharge every weapon system simultaneously, and then vanish again before return fire could be coordinated. "It's working," Hayes reported, his voice filled with amazement. "Their formation cohesion is breaking down. They're starting to cluster defensively, instead of maintaining aggressive positions." Chen watched the tactical display with professional satisfaction. The ethereals were powerful, but they were fighting like gods, expecting awe, expecting submission, expecting their enemies to follow established rules of engagement. Humanity, on the other hand, was fighting like the species that had clawed its way up from caves to starships in just a few millennia. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez called out, studying her biological readings, "I'm detecting massive stress indicators from the ethereal bioships. Their organisms aren't designed for this kind of sustained combat stress. The electromagnetic interference, combined with physical trauma, is causing systemic failures. The tide of battle was turning. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. The Ethereals had thousands of ships scattered across human space, and they were undoubtedly learning from this engagement. The next phase of the conflict would require humanity to prove that their initial success wasn't just luck. Torres, send a message to all human colonies, Chen ordered. Tell them the gods aren't immortal. Tell them we're coming. As the message transmitted across human space, carrying hope to millions of colonists who had spent days wondering if they would live to see another sunrise, the ethereal fleet around Mars began to retreat. For the first time in 10,000 years, beings who considered themselves gods were running from mortals. The real war was just beginning. 3 weeks after the first battle at Mars, the war between humanity and the ethereal dominion had transformed into something neither side had anticipated. The beings who had proclaimed themselves gods were discovering that mortals could be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Captain Chen stood in the command center of the UES Defiance, now serving as the flagship for Operation Godslayer, humanity's coordinated campaign to liberate every human world from ethereal occupation. Around her, holographic displays showed the current status of battles raging across 17 star systems. Report from the Centauri front, Lieutenant Torres announced, his voice carrying the exhaustion that had become common among all human crews. Admiral Park's fleet has successfully driven ethereal forces from 3 more colony worlds. Estimated enemy casualties include 12 capital ships and approximately 50 support vessels. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her research station, where she had been working non-stop to understand ethereal biology and technology. Captain, I've made a breakthrough in analyzing their communication networks. Their bioships aren't just connected to each other. They're all linked to a central consciousness that appears to be coordinating their entire war effort. Chen moved to examine Vasquez's findings. Explain. Think of it like a biological internet, Vasquez continued, her excitement breaking through her fatigue. Every ethereal ship, every ethereal being, is connected to what can only be described as a living network. That's how they've been able to coordinate across such vast distances instantaneously, but it's also their greatest weakness. Admiral Rodriguez, who had been studying tactical reports from across human space, looked up with interest. What kind of weakness? What? Vasquez activated her display, showing complex biological diagrams. If we could introduce the right kind of interference into their network, not just electromagnetic disruption, but something that affects their biological communication systems directly, we could potentially disrupt their entire civilization's ability to function. The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. Chen felt her pulse quicken as the possibilities became clear. You're talking about targeting their central nervous system on a galactic scale. Exactly. But we would need to get close enough to their primary network hub to deploy such an attack. And according to my analysis, that hub appears to be located on their homeworld, which they call the Eternal Nexus. Hayes joined the conversation from his tactical station. Captain, we've been tracking ethereal ship movements for weeks now. Based on their retreat patterns and resupply routes, I believe I can triangulate the location of their home system. But it's deep in the galactic core region, heavily defended territory. Chen looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had carried humanity through every challenge in their history. How heavily defended are we talking about? Preliminary estimates suggest at least 3,000 ships, Hayes replied grimly. Their entire remaining fleet is likely concentrated there, plus whatever fixed defenses they've constructed over millennia. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of what they were contemplating. A direct assault on the ethereal homeworld would be the largest military operation in human history against an enemy that still possessed significant technological advantages. Captain, Torres interrupted, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Fleet Admiral Wu appeared on the main screen. But she looked different than she had weeks ago. The strain of coordinating a galaxy-wide war was evident in her features. But there was also something else. a fierce pride that spoke of victories achieved against impossible odds. "All fleet commanders," she began. "I'm pleased to report that Phase 4 of Operation Godslayer has been approved by the Earth Council. Intelligence confirms, Dr. Vasquez's analysis. The ethereal network vulnerability represents our best opportunity to end this conflict decisively." Chen felt her heart rate increase. Phase 4 was the contingency plan they had all hoped would never be necessary, a direct assault on the ethereal homeworld, using every available human ship and weapon. "The Prometheus fleet will lead the assault," Admiral Wu continued. "Captain Chen, your tactical analysis and battlefield performance have been exemplary. The Defiance will serve as command vessel for the operation. Your objective is simple. Get Dr. Vasquez and her biological warfare package close enough to the Eternal Nexus to deploy it successfully." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew with the weight of their new mission. They were being asked to travel deep into enemy territory, penetrate the most heavily defended system in the galaxy, and deploy a weapon that could potentially end an entire civilization's ability to function. "Well," Chen said after a long moment, "I suppose we should start making preparations to kill some gods." The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of activity as humanity prepared for its greatest gamble. Every available ship was recalled from patrol duties and defensive positions. Weapons were loaded, systems were checked and double-checked, and crews said goodbye to families they might never see again. But there was something else happening throughout human space, something that would have amazed the ethereals if they had understood human psychology. Instead of fear or despair at the impossible odds, there was a growing sense of excitement. Humanity was about to attempt something that no species in galactic history had ever done: launch a direct assault on beings who considered themselves gods. The assembled human fleet was a sight that would have inspired poets if any had been present to witness it. Over 800 ships of all classes, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble destroyers, gathered at the staging point just outside the Sol system. The UES Defiance took her position at the head of the formation. Her hull scarred from weeks of combat, but her systems functioning perfectly. "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump," Torres announced from his communications station. Chen looked around her bridge one final time, seeing her crew at their positions with the calm professionalism that had carried them through every battle. "Dr. Vasquez, is your package secure? Biological warfare system is armed and ready for deployment," Vasquez confirmed. "Captain, I want you to know what we're about to attempt has never been tested on this scale. We're operating entirely on theoretical models." "Doctor," Chen replied with a slight smile, "humanity's entire history has been about turning theoretical models into practical reality. Today won't be any different." The journey to the galactic core took 18 hours of hyperspace travel, during which the human fleet maintained complete communication silence. When they finally dropped back into normal space at the edge of the ethereal home system, what they saw was both beautiful and terrifying. The eternal nexus hung before them like a living jewel, a world that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent energy, surrounded by orbital structures that defied conventional physics. And protecting it all was the largest concentration of military force that any human had ever witnessed. "Sensor count confirms Hayes's estimates," Torres reported quietly. 3,000 plus ethereal vessels in defensive formation around the homeworld, multiple space stations of unknown design. And Captain, I'm reading energy signatures that suggest planetary defense systems beyond anything in our databases. Chen studied the tactical display with the calm focus that had made her one of humanity's most respected commanders. "Analysis, Commander Hayes? They're deployed in a standard defensive shell formation," Hayes replied, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. "Logical, but predictable. They're still thinking like gods, assuming we'll approach with honor and fight them on their terms. And we're not going to do that, are we?" Admiral Rodriguez asked, with a grin that was equal parts terrifying and inspiring. "Not even close," Chen confirmed. "All ships. This is the Defiance. Execute Operation Morningstar." What happened next would be remembered as the moment when humanity proved that intelligence and determination could overcome any technological advantage. Instead of approaching the ethereal fleet directly, the human ships scattered throughout the system, using the gravitational effects of gas giants and asteroid fields to mask their approach. The first phase of the assault targeted the ethereal communication relays, the biological structures that allowed their fleet to coordinate as a single entity. Human ships appeared from unexpected angles, struck with devastating precision, and disappeared again before the enemy could respond effectively. Relay stations Alpha through Delta are down, Hayes reported. I'm reading massive confusion in their formation patterns. They're having trouble coordinating fleet movements. But the ethereals were not helpless. Even with their communications disrupted, individual ship commanders began to adapt, using their superior technology to strike back at the human attackers. The space around the Eternal Nexus became a chaotic battlefield where ships appeared and vanished like ghosts, exchanging fire across impossible distances. The UES Prometheus, leading her squadron in a frontal assault against the main ethereal defensive line, took tremendous damage, but continued fighting with the relentless determination that had become humanity's signature in space warfare. Admiral Kim's voice crackled across the communication channels as her ship's hull began to breach. "Defiance, this is Prometheus. We've punched a hole in their defensive perimeter. The path to the planet is clear, but it won't stay that way long. Get Dr. Vasquez to the surface now." Chen didn't hesitate. "All power to engines. Take us through that gap." Chen. The Defiance accelerated toward the Eternal Nexus with every system pushed beyond safety limits. Around them, the battle raged with an intensity that seemed to warp space itself, but their focus remained singular: get the biological weapon to the planet's surface. As they broke through the ethereal defensive line, Chen could see the true beauty of the alien homeworld. Cities that looked like living coral reefs stretched across continents, connected by flowing streams of bioluminescent energy. It was magnificent, alien, and utterly inhuman. "Deploying the package now," Dr. Vasquez announced as the Defiance entered the planet's atmosphere. "Biological agents will disperse through their atmospheric bio-network within minutes." The effect was almost instantaneous. Across the planet's surface, the flowing energy streams that connected ethereal cities began to flicker and dim. In space, the massive fleet that had been fighting with coordinated precision suddenly became confused, individual ships operating without central guidance. "It's working," Vasquez breathed, watching her instruments with amazement. "Their entire biological network is shutting down, not dying, just going dormant. They'll recover eventually, but for now, they're just ships in space, instead of extensions of a divine consciousness," Chen finished. "All ships. This is Defiance. The gods are blind. Show them what mortals can do." The final phase of the battle was swift and decisive. Without their network coordination, the ethereal fleet found themselves facing an enemy that had been designed from the ground up to fight without central command. Human ships, trained for independent operation and aggressive tactics, tore through the confused alien formations with devastating efficiency. Within 6 hours, the Ethereal Dominion's military forces had been effectively neutralized. Their ships surrendered or retreated to the outer system. Their planetary defenses went silent, and their claims of divinity were reduced to the desperate pleas of beings who had discovered they were mortal, after all. Standing on the bridge of the Defiance as the last ethereal vessels signaled their surrender, Captain Chen felt a profound sense of completion. Humanity had faced beings who claimed to be gods and had proven that determination, intelligence, and sheer bloody-minded stubbornness could overcome any advantage. "Captain," Torres called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the ethereal leadership on the planet's surface." The being that appeared on their screen was different from the arrogant entity that had delivered the original ultimatum weeks ago. This ethereal looked smaller, somehow diminished, and when it spoke there was no trace of divine authority in its voice. "Human Fleet Commander," it said simply, "we formally request terms of surrender. We acknowledge that our claim of divinity was incorrect. Your species has proven superior in ways we did not anticipate." Chen looked around at her crew, seeing the mixture of exhaustion and pride that came from achieving the impossible. "Terms are simple," she replied. "Withdraw from all human territory. Leave us alone. And remember that the next time someone claims to be a god, there are mortals out here who know how to prove them wrong." As news of the victory spread across human space, celebrations erupted on every world and space station. But for Chen and her crew, there was a deeper satisfaction than simple military victory. They had defended not just human territory, but human dignity, the right to remain free and independent in a galaxy full of beings who thought they knew better. The ethereal dominion would recover, eventually. Their biological networks would heal, their ships would be rebuilt, and their wounded pride would slowly mend. But they would never again make the mistake of underestimating the species that had evolved from predators on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. Humanity had met their gods and found them wanting. The universe was a little less mysterious and a lot more human than it had been before.